I'm Barrett Mitchell, 38 years old, Army Special Forces Sergeant with 17 years of service and 3 deployments. What should have been a normal divorce nearly cost me everything I loved. One piece of paper changed it all in that courtroom. No one expected what happened next, especially not my soon-to-be ex-wife. The judge's face said it all when he saw what I'd discovered. Before I share this wild journey, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see justice served to those who betray the people who sacrifice everything to protect them. My story begins like many others. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania with parents who valued service and commitment. My father had served in the Army during Vietnam, and while he never pushed me toward military service, his stories of brotherhood and purpose always resonated with me. After high school, I went to college on an ROTC scholarship, and by the time I graduated, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. The military became my second home. I excelled in training and quickly found my path to Special Forces. The discipline, the purpose, the brotherhood, it all felt right. But something was still missing in my personal life. That changed during a 4th of July barbecue at my buddy Travis Coleman's place. Travis and I had served together for years, and he was hosting a get-together during one of our rare breaks between training cycles. That's when I met her, Vanessa. She was Travis's wife's college roommate, visiting for the weekend. With her dark hair catching the summer sunlight and a laugh that seemed to light up the entire backyard, I was immediately drawn to her. "So you're the famous Barrett I've been hearing about," she said, handing me a beer. "I expected someone scarier looking based on all the stories." I remember smiling, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. "Don't believe everything Travis tells you. He tends to exaggerate. Actually, he said you saved his life in Afghanistan," she replied, her expression turning serious. "That doesn't sound like an exaggeration to me." From that moment, we were inseparable. Vanessa understood the military life. Her father had been Navy, and she said she knew what she was signing up for when we started dating. 6 months later, I proposed during a sunrise hike, and 3 months after that, we were married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family, many in uniform. The early years were everything I'd hoped for. Vanessa worked as a nurse at the hospital near the base, and we settled into a comfortable routine. When I was home, we made the most of our time together. When deployments came, we handled them as a team. Video calls, care packages, letters, we kept our connection strong across the distance. When Vanessa told me she was pregnant with our first child, I was in the middle of a training exercise. I remember sitting alone in my tent that night, staring at the ultrasound picture she'd sent, feeling a mix of joy and terror. 9 months later, our son Aiden was born. I was lucky to be home for his birth, on a rare break between assignments. Holding him for the first time, I made a silent promise to always protect him, no matter what. 3 years later, our daughter Sophia joined our family. With her big eyes and her mother's smile, she had me wrapped around her little finger from day one. Our family felt complete. As the children grew, so did my career. I moved up in rank, taking on more responsibilities. The deployments became longer, the missions more classified. I miss first steps, school plays, birthdays. But I always tried to make up for lost time when I returned, throwing myself fully into family life. "Daddy, when do you have to go away again?" Sophia would ask, climbing into my lap during story time. "Not for a while, princess," I'd tell her, even when I knew another deployment was looming. Aiden was different. As he got older, he became more understanding of my absences, proud to tell his friends his dad was a real-life action hero. But I saw the disappointment in his eyes each time I had to leave. Vanessa was my rock through it all, at least that's what I thought. She managed the household, took care of the kids, kept everything running smoothly. We had our arguments, like any couple, especially before and after deployments. The readjustment periods were always difficult. But we always found our rhythm again. Until my third deployment to a location I still can't fully disclose. 9 months in a high-threat environment with minimal contact opportunities. The few video calls I managed to have with Vanessa felt different. She seemed distracted, ended our conversations early, and rarely had the kids join to say hello. "Everything okay at home?" I asked during one call, noticing the tension in her face. "Fine, just busy," she'd say. "The hospital's been crazy. New administration making changes." I didn't press. In my position, focus was essential, and I couldn't afford to be distracted by concerns at home. So I pushed my worries aside, completed my mission, and counted down the days until I could return. As luck would have it, our extraction went smoother than expected, and I found myself heading home 2 weeks earlier than planned. I didn't tell Vanessa. I wanted to surprise her and the kids. I picked up flowers for her, a new video game for Aiden, and a stuffed unicorn for Sophia. After nearly 9 months away, I couldn't wait to hold my family again. Little did I know that my world was about to come crashing down around me. The drive from the base to our suburban home took 45 minutes. Every mile closer, my anticipation grew. I imagined the look on their faces when I walked through the door. The neighborhood looked exactly as I remembered it: well-maintained lawns, basketball hoops and driveways, bikes leaning against garages. Our 2-story colonial sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, the American flag I'd hung before leaving still fluttering by the front door. I pulled into the driveway at 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. The house looked quiet, which made sense. The kids would be in school. But Vanessa's car was in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar black BMW. I figured it might be a neighbor or a friend visiting. Vanessa had mentioned cutting back her hospital hours during my deployment to be more available for the children. Gifts in hand, I approached the front door. My key turned smoothly in the lock. As I stepped into the entryway, I noticed several things at once. There was a man's leather jacket hanging on our coat rack that I didn't recognize. An expensive pair of men's shoes, much larger than mine, sat neatly by the door. And there was a peculiar silence in the house, the kind that feels deliberate rather than natural. "Vanessa?" I called out, placing the flowers and gifts on the entry table. No response. I moved further into the house. The kitchen was spotless, 2 empty wine glasses sitting in the sink. On the counter was a prescription bottle with a name I didn't recognize, Dr. Lance Reynolds. That's when I heard it, a muffled laugh from upstairs, followed by the unmistakable creak of our bedroom floor. My military training kicked in automatically. I moved silently up the stairs, each step measured and careful. The master bedroom door was partially closed, a sliver of light visible through the gap. I don't need to describe in explicit detail what I saw when I pushed that door open. My wife of 11 years was in our bed with another man. They didn't notice me at first. When they did, their reactions couldn't have been more different. The man, tall, with salt and pepper hair and the physique of someone who spent more time at a country club than a gym, scrambled to cover himself, eyes wide with shock and fear. Vanessa, though, her reaction is what haunts me still. There was no shame, no embarrassment, not even surprise. Just cold annoyance, as if I'd interrupted an important business meeting. "You're early," she said flatly, pulling the sheet around herself. I stood frozen in the doorway, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind but unable to form a single word. I'd faced enemy fire, been in explosions, navigated hostile territory, but nothing had prepared me for this moment. The man had gathered his clothes and was hastily dressing. "I should go," he muttered. "No," Vanessa said, her voice firm. "This was bound to happen sooner or later. Might as well get it over with." She turned to me, her expression hardening. "Barrett, this is Lance. Dr. Lance Reynolds. He's the new administrator at the hospital." Lance extended his hand automatically, then seemed to realize the absurdity of the gesture and withdrew it. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," he said, though his tone suggested he was more concerned about the awkwardness than any genuine remorse. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "Long enough," Vanessa replied. She got out of bed, wrapped in our sheet, and reached for her robe hanging on the bathroom door. I've met someone better, Barrett. I want a divorce. The bluntness of her statement hit me like a physical blow. Better? I repeated. Lance is here. He's present. He doesn't disappear for months at a time to God knows where, doing God knows what. She was gaining confidence now, her voice taking on an accusatory edge. The kids need someone they can count on, not some part-time father who drops in between missions. The kids, I said, suddenly remembering them. Where are they? At school, where they always are on Tuesday afternoons, she replied with a touch of condescension. Lance picks them up sometimes when I'm working late shifts. They adore him. The idea of this stranger, this man who had been sleeping with my wife, being around my children sent a surge of anger through me. I took a step forward, and Lance flinched visibly. The kids know their father is a soldier, I said, working to keep my voice steady. They understand that I'm serving our country. Vanessa laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Is that what you tell yourself? Aiden has started acting out at school. Sophia cried for weeks after you left last time. They needed a father, so I found them one who would actually be there. Each word was like a knife. I looked between them, this woman I barely recognized and the man who had taken my place. Does he know he's sleeping with a married woman? That you're committing adultery under military law? Lance cleared his throat. Vanessa explained that your marriage has been over in all but name for years. That this was just a formality. I turned back to my wife. Is that true? Has our marriage been over for years without my knowledge? For just a moment, something like guilt flashed across her face, but it was quickly replaced by cold resolve. It's been over since you chose the military over your family. Again and again and again. I stood there, absorbing the full weight of her betrayal. Not just the affair, but the rewriting of our entire history together. All those video calls where she said she understood, all those reunions where she welcomed me home with open arms, had they all been lies? I think you should leave, she continued. Tonight. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be receiving divorce papers by the end of the week. This is my house too, I said, finding my voice again. My name is on the mortgage. These are my children. And where do you suggest Lance stay? She asked, as if this were a reasonable consideration. He's already moved most of his things in. The children are comfortable with him here. More disruption isn't in their best interest. The casual way she said it, the fact that this man had already begun moving into my home while I was deployed, made something snap inside me. But years of military discipline kept me from losing control completely. I want to see my children, I said firmly. Today. When they get home from school. Vanessa exchanged a glance with Lance. I don't think that's a good idea. Not until we've explained the situation to them properly. They think you're still overseas. You haven't even told them I'm back in the country? We were going to tell them this weekend, when we had more time to help them process everything. I looked around the bedroom, our bedroom, now tainted by their betrayal. Family photos still sat on the dresser, including our wedding picture. My service awards hung on the wall beside Vanessa's nursing certificates. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. I'll stay at Travis's tonight, I finally said, knowing I needed space to think clearly. But I'm coming back tomorrow to see my children. That's not negotiable. Fine, Vanessa conceded. After school. For an hour. I'll be present the entire time. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Pack a bag for me. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I'll pick it up on my way out. Without waiting for a response, I walked back downstairs. The flowers and gifts still sat on the entry table, a cruel reminder of the homecoming I'd imagined. I left them there, got in my car, and drove away from the life I thought I had. That night, sitting in Travis's spare bedroom, the full reality of my situation hit me. I broke down completely, something I hadn't done since basic training. Travis, true to his nature, sat silently beside me, offering a steady presence, and, when I was ready, a glass of whiskey. She's been planning this, I said finally, staring into my drink. All those months I was gone, she was setting this up. What are you going to do? Travis asked. I took a long sip of whiskey, feeling the burn down my throat. Fight. For my kids, for my home. I didn't survive 3 combat deployments to lose everything without a fight. Little did I know just how serious that fight would become. Exactly 1 week after discovering my wife's betrayal, a courier delivered divorce papers to Travis's house. I'd been expecting them, but seeing the formal legal documents made everything painfully real. Vanessa wasn't wasting any time. I called Marcus Donovan, an attorney recommended by several guys in my unit who'd gone through divorces. His office was located in a converted Victorian house downtown, the interior a stark contrast to the ornate exterior, all modern furnishings and technology. These demands are aggressive, Marcus said, reviewing the papers through reading glasses perched on his nose. Your wife is asking for the house, full custody of both children, 75% of your military pension, and alimony. She's claiming that your frequent deployments make you an unfit primary parent. I sat across from him, still struggling to reconcile the Vanessa I thought I knew with the person who would make such demands. Can she do that? Take everything, including my kids? Marcus removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. She can ask for it. Whether she gets it is another matter. Courts generally try to maintain relationships with both parents unless there's a compelling reason not to. Your military service shouldn't count against you, but I've seen some judges who don't understand the realities of military life. I've been a good father, I insisted. Whenever I'm home, I'm completely present for my children. And that's what we'll focus on, Marcus assured me. But I need to know everything, Barrett. Any skeletons in your closet that could be used against you? Drinking problems? Anger issues? Anything that could paint you as unstable or dangerous? I shook my head. Nothing like that. I've had some trouble sleeping since my last deployment, some nightmares, but nothing that affects my ability to function or parent. What about your wife? Anything in her history that might be relevant? I considered the question carefully. Not really. She's always been responsible, good at her job. The kids have always been well cared for. I paused, remembering something. Though recently, she's been letting her boyfriend pick up the kids from school. A man they barely know. Marcus made a note. That's something we can potentially use. Now, first things first, we need to establish regular visitation with your children while the divorce is pending. Have you seen them since you got back? I nodded, the memory still raw. Once, the day after I found them together. Vanessa supervised the entire hour, barely let me hug them. They seemed confused, distant. Sophia kept looking to Vanessa before answering any of my questions, like she needed permission to talk to me. That's concerning, Marcus said. We'll file for emergency temporary orders today. At minimum, you should have regular weekend visitation and several weekday evenings. Over the next few weeks, a new painful routine emerged. I was allowed to see my children twice a week, Wednesday evenings and Sunday afternoons, always under Vanessa's watchful eye. She converted the guest room into a neutral space for these visits, stripped of family photos or personal touches. It felt like visiting my own children in a sterile facility rather than the home we built together. During one Sunday visit, I noticed a bruise on Sophia's arm, a distinct pattern of 4 finger marks, as if someone had grabbed her roughly. What happened here, princess? I asked gently, pointing to the bruise. Before Sophia could answer, Vanessa interjected. She fell off the swing at school. Children get bruises all the time, Barrett. But Sophia wouldn't meet my eyes, and alarm bells rang in my head. When Vanessa stepped out briefly to answer a phone call, I knelt beside my daughter. Sophia, did someone hurt you? You can tell Daddy. She glanced nervously toward the door. Dr. Lance says I'm too noisy sometimes, she whispered. He doesn't like it when I sing during his important calls. Before I could ask more, Vanessa returned, ending our conversation. The incident kept me awake that night, a gnawing worry taking root. Our first court appearance for temporary arrangements was scheduled 3 weeks after I received the divorce papers. I arrived in my dress uniform, advised by Marcus that it would remind the judge of my service. Vanessa arrived in a conservative blue dress, playing the part of the devoted mother perfectly. Her lawyer, Tiffany Pearson, was known for her aggressive approach to family law. Judge Harold Winters presided, a stern-looking man in his 60s with a reputation for being fair but traditional in his views on family structure. The hearing was brief but devastating. While the court acknowledges Sergeant Mitchell's service to our country, Judge Winters said, the reality is that his deployment schedule has made Mrs. Mitchell the primary caregiver for the children throughout their lives. Uprooting them from their home and primary parent would not serve their best interests during this transitional period. The temporary order granted Vanessa residence in our family home and primary custody of the children. I was given 2 supervised visits per week in order to continue paying the mortgage plus temporary support payments. The financial strain meant I could only afford a small 1-bedroom apartment near the base, barely enough room for myself, let alone space for my children to stay overnight. The ruling hit me hard. That night, I sat alone in my sparse apartment, surrounded by moving boxes, wondering how my life had unraveled so completely in just a few weeks. My phone rang. It was my commanding officer, Major Rivera. "Mitchell, you missed the briefing today," he said, his tone more concerned than accusatory. "I'm sorry, sir. I had court for my divorce proceedings." There was a pause. "How'd it go?" "Not well, sir." Another pause. "Listen, Barrett, we've served together a long time. I know what kind of man you are. Take tomorrow off, get your head straight. But after that, I need you back at full capacity. The unit relies on you." "Understood, sir." "Thank you." After hanging up, I stared at a framed photo of Aiden and Sophia, the only decoration I'd put up in the apartment. The worry about Sophia's bruise, combined with her whispered confession, wouldn't leave me. Something wasn't right in my former home, and my children were caught in the middle. That night, I made a decision. If the legal system wouldn't properly protect my children in the short term, I needed to take matters into my own hands, legally, but proactively. I would approach this like a mission, gather intelligence, document everything, and build an irrefutable case. Little did I know that what I would discover would go far beyond a contentious divorce. 2 months into the divorce proceedings, I had settled into an uncomfortable routine. My supervised visits with the children remained tense, with Vanessa monitoring every interaction. At work, I maintained professional focus, but my commanding officer had removed me from field training to give me more stability during the divorce, a gesture I appreciated even though I missed the active duty. During one Wednesday visit, Aiden asked to show me his new video game in his bedroom. Vanessa initially objected but relented when Aiden insisted the game could only be played on his room's TV. Once we were alone, Aiden's demeanor changed completely. "Dad," he whispered, checking that the door was closed. "Dr. Lance plays weird games with us when Mom's at work." My blood ran cold. "What kind of games, buddy?" Aiden looked down. "He calls it military training. Says it'll make us tough like you. But it's not fun. He gets really mad if we mess up. Sophia cried last time and he trailed off." "He what, Aiden?" I prompted gently. He grabbed her arm really hard. "Said soldiers don't cry." Aiden looked up at me, his eyes swimming with confusion. "You never hurt us during your games, Dad." I maintained a calm exterior while my mind raced. "You're right, buddy. That's not how soldiers behave at all. We protect people, especially children." "Is he really a doctor like Mom says?" "He works at the hospital," I answered carefully. "Listen, Aiden, if anything like that happens again, I want you to call me right away, okay? No matter what time." Aiden nodded seriously. "I tried to tell Mom, but she said Dr. Lance is just helping us be more disciplined while you're gone." Our conversation was cut short by Vanessa opening the door. "Game time's over. Dinner's ready." That night, I filed a report with Child Protective Services, detailing what Aiden had told me along with my previous observations of Sophia's bruises. 3 days later, I received a call informing me that after an initial investigation, they found insufficient evidence of abuse and had closed the case. The caseworker mentioned that Vanessa had provided counter-evidence that I was making false accusations due to divorce hostility. This setback only strengthened my resolve. I began documenting everything meticulously: photographs of any marks or bruises on the children, notes from our conversations, changes in their behavior. I also reached out to their school, arranging a meeting with Sophia's counselor, Mrs. Patterson. Sophia has become withdrawn this semester, Mrs. Patterson confirmed, reviewing her notes. Her teacher reports she's stopped participating in music time, which used to be her favorite activity. When asked why, she said singing gets people in trouble. Has she mentioned anyone making her feel uncomfortable or afraid? I asked. Mrs. Patterson hesitated. She did mention that her mom's friend doesn't like noise. I asked if this person had ever hurt her, but she changed the subject. I've been monitoring the situation, but without clear disclosure. I understood the limitations she faced. Please keep an eye on her. And Aiden too. If you notice anything concerning, I've provided my contact information. My next step required some creativity. During my Sunday visit, I brought new presents for both children, including a teddy bear for Sophia. What Vanessa didn't know was that the bear contained a small, legal recording device that activated with motion and sound. I wasn't proud of the tactic, but my children's safety came first. This is a special bear, I told Sophia quietly while Vanessa was in the kitchen. He helps keep bad dreams away, but only if he stays right by your bed. The recordings I retrieved during my next visit were disturbing. Though mostly capturing normal household sounds, there were several instances of Reynolds yelling at the children, using language no child should hear. In one recording, Sophia was crying while Reynolds demanded she stop the waterworks, or there would be real consequences. But I needed more. Through Travis, I connected with another soldier whose wife worked at the same hospital as Reynolds. She agreed to discreetly ask around about the new administrator. He's not well liked, she reported back. Several nurses have complained about his aggressive management style. There are rumors he was forced out of his previous hospital in Arizona, but no one knows why exactly. This information gave me a new lead to follow. Using military connections, I was able to run a more thorough background check on Dr. Lance Reynolds than a standard civilian search would provide. What I discovered was alarming. Reynolds had indeed left his previous position under a cloud of harassment allegations that had been settled quietly. More concerning, he had a sealed juvenile record in Nevada. Through further investigation, I learned he had been dismissed from medical school initially due to ethical violations, but had somehow been readmitted to a different program a year later. His medical credentials were legitimate, but his administrative career showed a pattern of short tenures at various institutions across 3 states. The most disturbing discovery came when I examined my family's financial records. Since I had maintained joint accounts with Vanessa, I had legal access to the transaction history. In the months leading up to my return, there had been unusual activity: large transfers to an offshore account, applications for credit using our joint information, and attempts to access my military benefits information. I brought this evidence to Marcus. They're not just having an affair, I explained. I think Reynolds is using Vanessa to gain access to military benefits and possibly information. Marcus reviewed the financial documents with growing concern. This goes beyond family court issues. There could be fraud involved here, possibly identity theft. Have you spoken with the military legal office about this? I nodded. I have a meeting with JAG tomorrow. But there's something else. I hesitated, then continued. Some of the account access attempts included trying to view my deployment records and unit information. Information that's classified. Marcus looked up sharply. That crosses a very different line. My meeting with the JAG officer confirmed the seriousness of the situation. Captain Walters reviewed my evidence carefully. "This warrants access to your personal information is concerning enough," he said, using the military slang for a civilian. "But these attempts to access restricted deployment data could constitute a security breach. I'm going to need to involve counterintelligence." Within days, I was sitting in a secure room with 2 counterintelligence officers. They were particularly interested in the timing of Reynolds' appearance in Vanessa's life, which coincided almost exactly with the announcement of my unit's deployment, and his unusual interest in my mission details. "Did your wife know any classified details about your deployment?" one officer asked. "No," I replied firmly. "I never discuss operational specifics with anyone outside my unit. But she would know general locations, communication protocols, approximate return dates?" I nodded reluctantly. "General information only. Nothing tactical." The officer exchanged glances with his colleague. "We need to dig deeper into Dr. Reynolds. This may be nothing, but the pattern raises red flags." I was introduced to Major Wesley Griffin from Military Police, who would coordinate the investigation moving forward. He was direct and professional, laying out the approach they would take. "We need to determine if this is simply a case of financial opportunism or something more concerning," Major Griffin explained. "The challenge is doing so without alerting Reynolds that he's under investigation." "What about my children?" I asked. "They're living with this man." "We understand your concern," Major Griffin assured me. "But if Reynolds is involved in something beyond domestic deception, spooking him could make the situation more volatile. We need to proceed carefully." The plan we developed was multifaceted. I would appear to be emotionally breaking down, giving the impression that I was considering giving up the custody fight. This would hopefully lull Vanessa and Reynolds into a false sense of security, making them less careful. Meanwhile, military intelligence would monitor Reynolds' communications and movements. The final piece was a carefully crafted information trap. Through channels that would appear coincidental, we arranged for Reynolds to overhear mention of a new security protocol being implemented at the base, one that would supposedly affect all military family access. It was a fabrication designed to see if he would attempt to exploit it. He took the bait almost immediately. Within 48 hours, Reynolds had approached an undercover operative posing as a disgruntled IT contractor, offering money for access credentials to the base's supposed new security system. With this evidence, combined with the financial fraud documentation, Major Griffin secured authorization to present the case to the civilian court handling my divorce. A classified briefing was arranged for Judge Winters, explaining the national security implications while keeping operational details confidential. The night before our final court date, I barely slept. Everything hinged on the judge's reaction to the evidence we'd compiled. I laid out my dress uniform for the morning, knowing it might be the most important day of my life, and possibly my children's as well. As I finally drifted off to sleep, my last thought was of Aiden and Sophia. Tomorrow, one way or another, everything would change. The investigation into Reynolds had uncovered something far more sinister than I could have imagined. What began as a suspicion about child mistreatment had evolved into a counterintelligence operation. As Major Griffin and his team dug deeper into Reynolds' background, they discovered communications with known associates of a foreign intelligence service. "We believe Reynolds was placed specifically to target military families," Major Griffin explained during our final briefing before court. "Your wife may have been selected because of your special forces status and access." "Are you saying Vanessa is knowingly involved in espionage?" I asked, still struggling to reconcile this with the woman I had married. "We don't have evidence she's wittingly participating in intelligence gathering," Griffin clarified. "But she has been manipulated into providing access and information. The financial fraud appears to be Reynolds' personal side operation." The intelligence team had traced Reynolds' history back further than my initial investigation. His medical credentials were legitimate, but he had spent 3 years unaccounted for between medical school and his first hospital position. During those years, he had traveled extensively to countries known for hostile intelligence operations. Most damning was the discovery of specialized communication equipment in his vehicle and a storage unit rented under a false name. The equipment matched known foreign intelligence protocols. This wasn't just about my divorce anymore, it was a matter of national security. Tomorrow in court, we'll have a team ready, Major Griffin continued. Once the judge reviews the evidence, he'll likely call a recess to his chambers. That's when we'll move. Military police will secure the courtroom and detain both Reynolds and your wife for questioning. And my children? I asked, my primary concern unchanged despite the escalating situation. We've coordinated with Child Welfare Services. They'll have representatives present to take temporary custody until you're cleared to receive them, Griffin assured me. This has to be handled delicately, both for their emotional well-being and operational security. That night, alone in my apartment, I reviewed the sealed envelope I would present to the judge. It contained a summary of the counterintelligence findings, authorization codes the judge could use to verify the information's authenticity, and formal military police intervention request. The document was classified, meaning I couldn't review all its contents, but I understood the gravity of what it represented. I called Travis, needing to ground myself before tomorrow's confrontation. Everything set? He asked, already briefed on the general plan due to his role in my unit. As much as it can be, I replied. I never imagined my divorce would turn into a national security operation. You okay with all this? It's going to be rough on the kids no matter how carefully it's handled. I sighed, the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. What choice do I have? Reynolds is dangerous, to my children and potentially to others. I have to trust the system to work this time. I'll be there tomorrow, Travis promised. Back row, civilian clothes. Just another spectator. His support meant more than I could express. Thanks, brother. Sleep eluded me completely that night. I laid awake, cycling through scenarios, contingency plans, and worst-case outcomes. By morning, I was operating on adrenaline and determination. I dressed methodically in my formal uniform, each medal and ribbon representing sacrifices made for country and family. The irony wasn't lost on me. Those same sacrifices had created the distance that Vanessa had exploited to bring Reynolds into our lives. As I prepared to leave, I looked at the photos of my children one last time. Hang on, guys, I whispered. Dad's coming. The courthouse was busier than usual that morning, a drug trial and another courtroom drawing media attention. This worked in our favor, providing cover for the military police officers stationed discreetly throughout the building. Major Griffin, dressed in civilian clothes, nodded subtly as I passed him in the hallway. Outside courtroom 3, Marcus waited with our case files. Everything ready? He asked quietly. I patted the inside pocket of my uniform jacket where the sealed envelope rested. As ready as it'll ever be. When we entered the courtroom, Vanessa and Tiffany Pearson were already seated at their table. Reynolds sat directly behind them in the gallery, looking confident in an expensive suit. None of them showed any sign of suspecting what was about to unfold. Judge Winters entered, and we all rose. As he took his seat, I caught his eye briefly. There was a slight nod of recognition. He had been briefed that something unusual might occur but didn't know the specifics. Before we begin final arguments in Mitchell vs. Mitchell, Judge Winters announced, I want to remind everyone that my primary concern is the well-being of the minor children involved. This has been a contentious case, and I expect professional behavior from all parties today. Tiffany Pearson rose first, launching into her carefully prepared argument for why Vanessa should receive everything she demanded. The picture she painted of me was barely recognizable, an absent father, emotionally distant, whose military career made him fundamentally unsuited for parenthood. Mrs. Mitchell has been the stable presence in these children's lives, Pearson argued. Sergeant Mitchell, while serving his country admirably, has been physically absent for nearly 40% of their lives. The children need consistency, Your Honor, not a father who disappears for months at a time on classified missions. I maintained a neutral expression, though each accusation stung. Marcus had advised me to appear stoic rather than defensive. Furthermore, Pearson continued, Mrs. Mitchell has established a new relationship with Dr. Lance Reynolds, a respected medical professional who has shown genuine interest in providing a stable male influence for the children. Unlike Sergeant Mitchell, Dr. Reynolds has a predictable schedule and has already formed bonds with both children. I glanced at Reynolds, who sat straighter at this mention, a self-satisfied smile briefly crossing his face. If he only knew what was coming. In conclusion, Your Honor, we ask that Mrs. Mitchell be granted the family home, full physical custody of the children, with Sergeant Mitchell receiving limited supervised visitation until he can demonstrate more consistency in his presence. Additionally, given the sacrifices Mrs. Mitchell has made to support Sergeant Mitchell's career, we believe the requested division of assets, including 75% of his military pension, is more than fair. Judge Winters nodded without expression. Thank you, Ms. Pearson. He turned to our table. Mr. Donovan, your response? Marcus stood, straightening his tie. Your Honor, we had prepared extensive arguments refuting Ms. Pearson's characterization of my client. However, given developments that have come to light in recent days, Sergeant Mitchell would like to directly address the court with new information pertinent to this case. The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded. Proceed, Sergeant Mitchell. I rose slowly, feeling every eye in the courtroom on me. Your Honor, throughout these proceedings, I've been portrayed as an absent father who chose career over family. The truth is, I've always tried to balance my duty to my country with my duty to my children. When I discovered my wife's infidelity, I was devastated but prepared to work through a fair divorce process. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Reynolds maintained his composed facade. However, in the course of gathering evidence for these proceedings, I discovered information that goes beyond our divorce dispute. Information that concerns the safety of my children and potentially broader security concerns. Judge Winters leaned forward slightly. What kind of information, Sergeant? With the court's permission, I have a sealed document that I've been authorized to present directly to you. I removed the envelope from my jacket. Tiffany Pearson immediately objected. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Any evidence should have been shared during discovery. This information came to light after discovery closed. Marcus interjected. And due to its sensitive nature, there are protocols that must be followed regarding its disclosure. Judge Winters considered for a moment. I'll review the document in chambers before determining its admissibility. Sergeant, please approach. I walked forward, acutely aware of Vanessa's confused expression and Reynolds' suddenly alert posture. Placing the envelope on the judge's bench, I stepped back and returned to my seat. Judge Winters opened the envelope carefully, removing several pages marked with classified headers. His expression remained neutral as he began reading, but gradually his eyebrows rose. By the third page, his face had paled noticeably. He looked up, first at me, then at Reynolds, his expression hardening. Without a word, he pressed a button under his bench. Within seconds, a bailiff appeared at his side. Judge Winters leaned over, whispering instructions. The bailiff nodded and immediately moved to the courtroom doors. This court is temporarily in recess, Judge Winters announced, his voice noticeably tenser than before. No one is to leave this courtroom. Bailiff, secure the doors immediately. Confused murmurs broke out across the courtroom. Vanessa turned to her lawyer, whispering urgently. Reynolds had gone completely still, his eyes darting between the judge, the doors, and me. Your Honor, what is the meaning of this? Tiffany Pearson demanded, rising from her seat. Ms. Pearson, please be seated. Judge Winters ordered. I need to review these documents in chambers with appropriate authorities. This court is in recess for 30 minutes. I repeat, no one is to leave this courtroom. As the judge exited through his private door, taking the classified documents with him, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted from confusion to tension. Reynolds leaned forward, whispering something to Vanessa that made her face drain of color. I caught Travis's eye across the room. He gave me an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was proceeding as planned. Major Griffin had slipped out through a side door, presumably to coordinate with the judge and the waiting military police team. The next 30 minutes were among the longest of my life. Reynolds became increasingly agitated, checking his watch repeatedly and scanning the room. Vanessa alternated between demanding explanations from her lawyer and casting accusatory glances in my direction. Finally, the door to the judge's chambers opened. Judge Winters emerged, followed by Major Griffin, now in full military police uniform, and 2 JAG officers. The judge took his seat, his expression grave. "Court is back in session," he announced. "Based on the evidence presented to me, I am temporarily suspending these divorce proceedings pending the resolution of a parallel investigation." He turned to the gallery. "Dr. Lance Reynolds, please approach the bench." Reynolds hesitated, then slowly stood. "Your Honor, I'm not a party to this case. I'm simply here to support Mrs. Mitchell." "Approach the bench immediately, Dr. Reynolds," the judge repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. As Reynolds reluctantly moved forward, the courtroom doors opened. 6 military police officers entered, taking positions around the room. Vanessa gasped, turning to me with a mix of confusion and growing fear. "What have you done?" she hissed across the aisle. Before I could respond, Judge Winters spoke again. "This court is now aware of credible evidence suggesting criminal activity beyond the scope of family court. Major Griffin, you may proceed." Major Griffin stepped forward. "Dr. Lance Reynolds, you are being detained for questioning regarding potential violations of the Espionage Act, identity theft, fraud, and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Reynolds' composed facade finally cracked. "This is absurd. I'm a hospital administrator. She's just a nurse." He pointed at Vanessa, who recoiled in shock. "She doesn't know anything important." His choice of words was telling, not denying the accusations, but minimizing Vanessa's value as an intelligence source. 2 military police officers moved forward, taking Reynolds by the arms. "Vanessa Mitchell," Major Griffin continued, "you are also being detained for questioning regarding your potential involvement in these matters. You are not under arrest at this time, but we require your cooperation with this investigation." Tiffany Pearson jumped to her feet. "My client has no idea what's happening here. This is clearly a tactic by Sergeant Mitchell to influence the divorce proceedings." "Ms. Pearson," Judge Winters interrupted, "I have reviewed sufficient evidence to find these actions warranted. Your client will be treated fairly and provided legal representation for this separate matter." As Vanessa was escorted out by female officers, her eyes found mine one last time. The betrayal and anger I expected to see were there, but underneath was something else: fear. Not just fear of punishment, but a dawning realization that she might have been manipulated in ways she hadn't understood. After they were removed, Judge Winters addressed the remaining courtroom. "This court will recess for 2 weeks while these matters are investigated. In the interim, I am issuing an emergency order granting temporary full custody of the minor children to Sergeant Mitchell." He looked directly at me. "The children are currently being picked up from school by Child Welfare Services. They will be released to your custody after a brief evaluation." Relief washed over me so intensely that I had to grip the table to remain standing. After months of fighting, my children would be coming home, not to the house they knew, but to my small apartment that would somehow have to become their sanctuary in the chaos. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Travis approached, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder. "It's almost over, brother. You did it." I nodded, unable to find words for the moment. The battle was far from over. There would be investigations, likely criminal trials, and eventually, we would have to return to the divorce proceedings. But for now, my children would be safe. And ultimately, that was all that mattered. The courtroom had been cleared except for essential personnel. Judge Winters remained on the bench, now joined by a federal prosecutor and additional military representatives. I sat at the defense table with Marcus, while 2 empty chairs at the prosecution table awaited Vanessa and Reynolds, who were being processed in separate rooms. Before we continue, Judge Winters announced, I want to clarify the unusual nature of these proceedings. We are combining aspects of family court with a preliminary hearing on the security matters that have arisen. This is not standard procedure, but given the circumstances and the involvement of minor children, we're making an exception. The doors opened, and Vanessa entered first, escorted by a female military officer. She had been crying, her makeup smudged and her earlier confidence completely evaporated. A court-appointed attorney I didn't recognize accompanied her. She avoided looking in my direction. Minutes later, Reynolds was brought in, now handcuffed and flanked by 2 MPs. His attorney, a sharp-looking man in an expensive suit, whispered urgently in his ear as they took their seats. For the record, Judge Winters continued, Dr. Lance Reynolds has been detained on suspicion of espionage, fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. Mrs. Vanessa Mitchell is currently being treated as a person of interest in these investigations, not as a defendant. Reynolds' attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, my client categorically denies all allegations of espionage. He is a respected medical professional who has been maliciously targeted by a jealous husband unable to accept the end of his marriage. Counsel, the judge responded firmly. I have reviewed evidence that suggests otherwise. However, your client will have full opportunity to defend himself in the appropriate venue. Today's proceedings will focus primarily on the custody and safety of the Mitchell children. The federal prosecutor, a stern woman named Catherine Brooks, approached the bench with a folder. Your Honor, we have prepared a summary of the evidence that can be safely discussed in open court without compromising ongoing counterintelligence operations. Judge Winters reviewed the documents, then nodded. Proceed. The government has evidence that Dr. Reynolds has, for at least 18 months, been systematically targeting military families for the purpose of gathering sensitive information. His relationship with Mrs. Mitchell appears to have been initiated specifically because of Sergeant Mitchell's Special Forces status and access to classified operations. Vanessa's head snapped up, shock evident on her face. This was clearly news to her. Digital forensics have recovered communications between Dr. Reynolds and known foreign intelligence assets. Brooks continued. Additionally, financial records indicate payments to offshore accounts following successful information transfers. While we are still determining Mrs. Mitchell's level of awareness or involvement, the evidence suggests Dr. Reynolds used his relationship with her to access military installation information, deployment schedules, and attempted to obtain classified operational details. Reynolds remained stone-faced, but his attorney was frantically taking notes. Furthermore, Brooks added, during the execution of search warrants on Dr. Reynolds' vehicle and storage unit, specialized communication equipment was recovered, along with multiple false identification documents. The prosecutor then turned to the family court aspects. Regarding the child endangerment charges, we have witness statements from the Mitchell children, school officials, and audio recordings that document verbal abuse. Medical examination of the children yesterday revealed bruising consistent with physical discipline on the younger child, Sophia Mitchell. At this, I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Marcus placed a steadying hand on my arm. Your Honor, Reynolds' attorney interjected. Any alleged discipline was well within reasonable parental boundaries. Dr. Reynolds was simply trying to maintain order in a household disrupted by Sergeant Mitchell's frequent absences. Judge Winters' expression hardened. Counsel, Dr. Reynolds is not a parent to these children. He had no legal authority to impose any form of discipline, reasonable or otherwise. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice barely audible. I didn't know about the bruises. I work night shifts sometimes. Lance said he was just helping with structure and discipline. Mrs. Mitchell. Judge Winters addressed her directly. Your children's welfare was your primary responsibility. Allowing a man you had known for less than a year to discipline your children in your absence shows, at minimum, a serious lapse in judgment. Vanessa lowered her head, shoulders slumping in defeat. The judge turned back to the federal prosecutor. Ms. Brooks, what is the government's position regarding custody of the Mitchell children during these proceedings? The government supports awarding temporary full custody to Sergeant Mitchell, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Mitchell pending further investigation into her level of involvement in Dr. Reynolds' activities. Reynolds suddenly lunged forward, his handcuffs clanking against the table. She knew nothing, he shouted, surprising everyone. Vanessa was just a way to access the base and military families. She's too self-absorbed to notice anything suspicious. His outburst, apparently intended to help Vanessa, actually confirmed his criminal intent. His attorney tried to silence him, but Reynolds continued. This is ridiculous. I'm a hospital administrator, not some spy. Remove the defendant, Judge Winters ordered, and the MPs quickly escorted a still protesting Reynolds from the courtroom. In the momentary silence that followed, I caught Vanessa's eye for the first time. There was no anger there anymore, just devastation and confusion. Whatever her role in all this, she was beginning to understand how thoroughly she had been used. Judge Winters cleared his throat. Based on the evidence presented, and with the children's welfare as my primary concern, I am awarding temporary full custody to Sergeant Barrett Mitchell, effective immediately. Mrs. Mitchell will be granted supervised visitation once weekly, pending further investigation and a psychological evaluation. He turned to me directly. Sergeant Mitchell, do you have adequate housing for your children? I have a one-bedroom apartment near the base, Your Honor, I admitted. It's small, but I've begun looking for larger accommodations. The judge considered this. Given the circumstances, I am granting you exclusive use of the family home for the next 30 days, after which we will reassess the living situation. Mrs. Mitchell will need to find alternative housing during this period. It was more than I had hoped for. The children would be able to remain in their familiar environment during this traumatic time. I also order that all joint financial accounts be frozen pending investigation of potential fraud, with the exception of a reasonable allowance for Mrs. Mitchell's basic needs and Sergeant Mitchell's childcare expenses. Judge Winters shuffled his papers, then looked up one final time. This has been an extraordinary case combining elements of family law, criminal behavior, and national security. I want to commend Sergeant Mitchell for his diligence in protecting not only his children, but potentially his country as well. He banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. The criminal aspects of this case will proceed through appropriate federal channels. As Vanessa was led away by her attorney, she paused near me. The children, she said quietly. Are they okay? Despite everything, I could see genuine concern in her eyes. They're safe, I replied. That's what matters now. She nodded once, then continued out of the courtroom without another word. Marcus clasped my shoulder. Congratulations. It's not over, but this is a huge victory. It doesn't feel like a victory, I admitted. My children have been traumatized, their mother is under investigation, and their world has been turned upside down. But they're safe. Marcus reminded me, echoing my own words to Vanessa. And they have you. That's where healing begins. Major Griffin approached as we gathered our materials. Child Welfare Services will bring the children to the family home at 1,700 hours. We'll have a counselor present to help with the transition. Do you need anything in the meantime? I thought about the empty refrigerator at the house, the unmade beds, the need to create some sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. Just some time to get the house ready. Of course, he nodded. And Mitchell? For what it's worth, you handled this like a true professional. Not many could have maintained such discipline under the circumstances. As we exited the courthouse, reporters had already gathered, alerted by the unusual police presence. Marcus guided me to a side exit where Travis waited in his car. The children? Travis asked immediately as I slid into the passenger seat. Coming home tonight, I replied, the reality of it finally sinking in. To our house. Travis grinned, starting the engine. Then let's get your home ready for them, Sergeant Dad. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lifting. The road ahead would be challenging, but my mission was clear: heal my family and rebuild our lives, one day at a time. 6 weeks after the dramatic courtroom revelation, life had begun settling into a new normal. The family home, once tainted by betrayal, was slowly becoming a place of healing. Aidan and Sophia's initial confusion and anxiety had gradually given way to relief as routines were re-established and stability returned. The criminal case against Reynolds was proceeding through the federal system. He faced multiple charges of espionage, fraud, and child endangerment, with prosecutors confident in their case given the substantial evidence. Vanessa's situation was more complicated. After extensive questioning and investigation, authorities had determined she was not knowingly involved in Reynolds' espionage activities. She had been manipulated, her access to military communities exploited. However, she still faced potential charges related to financial fraud, as she had participated in accessing my accounts and benefits. In a deal with prosecutors, Vanessa agreed to cooperate fully against Reynolds in exchange for reduced charges. Her weekly supervised visits with the children were awkward but gradually improving as she worked with a therapist to understand her own role in the disaster that had befallen our family. The divorce proceedings had resumed, but with a markedly different tone. Judge Winters had made his position clear. My military service would not be held against me in custody determinations, and Vanessa's previous demands were off the table. Marcus was confident we would reach a settlement that prioritized the children's well-being while protecting my rights as their father. One Wednesday afternoon, I sat across from Colonel Rivera in his office, reviewing the paperwork for my new assignment. Training Officer for the Special Forces Qualification Course. I read aloud. Based permanently here at Fort Bragg. Colonel Rivera nodded. You've earned it, Mitchell. 17 years of exemplary service, 3 combat deployments. Now you'll be shaping the next generation of operators. No more deployments? I confirmed, still processing what this meant for my family. Not unless there's a major global crisis. This is a 3-year minimum assignment, with priority for continuation if your performance meets standards. He leaned forward. Which, given your record, I have no doubt it will. The relief was immense. After years of balancing military duty with family responsibilities, I could now be present for my children when they needed me most. Thank you, sir. This means more than you know. Don't thank me, Rivera replied. This recommendation came from higher up. Your handling of the Reynolds situation impressed people who don't impress easily. That evening, as I prepared dinner in our kitchen, Aidan set the table while Sophia carefully arranged napkins at each place. These small domestic routines had become precious, anchoring us through the ongoing legal storms. Dad? Aidan asked, placing the last fork. Is Mom still in trouble? I measured my words carefully, as the children's therapist had advised. Mom made some mistakes and trusted someone she shouldn't have. She's working with the authorities to fix those mistakes. But she's not going to jail like Dr. Lance? Sophia asked, her small face serious. No, Princess. Mom will need to do some community service and continue seeing her therapist, but she won't go to jail. Relief crossed both their faces. Despite everything, they still loved their mother, a fact I respected and supported. Children shouldn't have to choose between parents, even when one has failed them. And we're staying with you now? Aidan confirmed, something he still needed reassurance about regularly. Yes, buddy. This is your home, and I'm not going anywhere. My new job means I'll be here every day. No more long deployments. Sophia approached, wrapping her arms around my waist. Promise? I knelt to her level, looking into eyes so like her mother's but filled with innocent trust that needed to be protected, not exploited. I promise, Sophia. Dad's home for good. After dinner, homework, and bedtime stories, I sat on the back deck with a cup of coffee. Travis and his wife Maria had joined us for dinner, part of my effort to maintain positive relationships in the children's lives. Now, Travis sat beside me in comfortable silence as crickets chirped in the summer darkness. 3 months ago, I thought I'd lost everything. I said finally. My wife, my children, my home. Travis nodded. Life has a way of throwing the worst at us sometimes. Especially those who serve. I keep wondering if I could have prevented it somehow. If I'd been home more, noticed the signs earlier. Don't do that to yourself. Travis interrupted firmly. You fulfilled your duty to your country and your family. Vanessa made her choices. Reynolds made his. Neither is on you. I sipped my coffee, letting his words sink in. The kids are doing better. Sophia's singing again. Aiden joined the soccer team at school. They're resilient, like their dad, Travis replied. And they know they're safe now. That's what matters. Inside, the phone rang. I excused myself to answer it. Sergeant Mitchell? A familiar voice said. This is Marcus Donovan. I've just received the final settlement offer from Vanessa's new attorney. I think you'll be pleased. The terms were indeed favorable. Full physical custody remained with me, with Vanessa receiving more substantial visitation as she completed her therapy program. The house would stay with me and the children, with Vanessa receiving a fair but modest financial settlement. My military pension remained intact. Most importantly, the agreement explicitly acknowledged that my military service would not be used against me in any future custody modifications. After hanging up, I returned to the deck with a weight lifted from my shoulders. It's over, I told Travis. The divorce is settled. Congratulations, he said, raising his coffee mug in a toast. To new beginnings. Later that night, after Travis and Maria had left, I checked on the children one last time before bed. Aiden slept sprawled across his bed, surrounded by sports equipment and comic books. In Sophia's room, her collection of stuffed animals had been carefully arranged around her, with one special teddy bear, a new one with no hidden devices, clutched tightly in her arms. Standing in the hallway between their rooms, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path forward wasn't perfect. There would be ongoing legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and the complex navigation of co-parenting with Vanessa once the dust settled. But the fundamental threat had been removed, and my children were safe. I picked up a framed family photo from the hallway table, taken before the deployments, the betrayal, the courthouse drama. For a moment, I allowed myself to mourn what had been lost. Then I replaced it with a newer photo, just the three of us at Aiden's recent soccer game, smiles genuine as still healing. 3 months after the courtroom revelation, I received a call from Major Griffin. Thought you'd want to know, he said without preamble. Reynolds accepted a plea deal. 20 years, no possibility of parole for 15. He's giving up his entire network in exchange for avoiding the death penalty for espionage. Good, I replied simply. Justice had been served, though the damage he'd done to my family couldn't be undone by any prison sentence. There's something else, Griffin continued. Part of his formal statement confirmed that Vanessa was an unwitting participant. He specifically targeted her because of your position, using her vulnerability during your deployment. I thought that might give you some closure. It did in a way. While it didn't excuse Vanessa's betrayal, it helped explain how the woman I'd loved for over a decade could have been so thoroughly manipulated. Life continued to move forward. The children thrived under the new stability. My training position allowed me to be home every night, helping with homework, attending school functions, and rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. Vanessa, to her credit, committed fully to her therapy and parenting classes, gradually earning expanded visitation rights. One evening, as I helped Sophia with her math homework while Aiden practiced guitar in his room, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a dating app notification. Travis's wife had apparently taken it upon herself to create a profile for me. I started to delete it, then hesitated. Perhaps someday, I would be ready to trust again, to open our healing family to new possibilities. Not yet, but someday. For now, my focus remained where it belonged, on 2 young lives that had been entrusted to my care, and on rebuilding a home where security meant more than classified documents and counterintelligence operations. It meant love, consistency, and the promise of better days ahead. What would you do if you were betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Have you ever discovered something shocking about a person you thought you knew? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Your support means everything as we continue to share stories of resilience and healing. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the greatest strength comes from our darkest moments.